Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to our 12 o'clock Sunday Bible study. Today we're going to wrap up the Maximum Marriage Workshop Part 4, uh, communication. Now, that word may seem somewhat unimpressive, I guess you could say. I guarantee you this is going to be a powerful, powerful teaching for people, not only married people, single people, all of us will need some of these lessons that we're going to cover today in our Bible study, Maximum Marriage Workshop, Part 4. All right, let me begin with a scripture in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19. I have it up on the board, the basics of it. It reads, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." This was something that I think all of us could benefit from listening. I remember the adage, and I'm sure many of you have heard it, silence is golden. You probably have heard silence is golden. I've asked many people over the years if they knew the other part of that adage, which is speech is silver, silence is golden. In other words, listening is preferable to speaking. And that's what James was writing here. Here's a classic example. And it really speaks to our culture today that we find ourselves in. This is in Genesis chapter 21. Let me set the story. Abraham and Sarah wanted a child. Sarah couldn't conceive, so Sarah told Abraham, "Take my handmaiden Hagar and have a child." And he does. And the child was born, and the name of the child is Ishmael. Now, Ishmael, just as an aside, becomes the father of the Arab nations. But there's a problem with Ishmael. A little while later, Sarah, according to God's word, becomes pregnant, and she has a son of her own. They name him Isaac, the son of promise. Well, the two boys don't get along well, and of course, Sarah recognizes this. So we pick up the story here. "And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, that was her handmaiden, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking." That's Ishmael's mocking. "Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac." Well, this is the wife giving Abraham a little bit of advice, if you will. "But the thing," continuing verse 11, "the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of the bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto you, listen unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called." Now there's a classic example. Now at first you would say, what's the example of? Well, the example is that the wife is giving the husband some godly advice. But there's another story in the story, and it's this. Abraham doesn't listen to his wife, and the problem became so critical. This is mind-blowing. God intervenes to get Abraham's attention. Surely he will listen to God's voice, and of course he does. And we know now the history. Isaac becomes the father of the Jewish nation, and Ishmael becomes the father of the Arab nations. And to this day, those two boys don't get along. They're still fighting in the Middle East. It's an amazing clip out of biblical history, if you will, that's playing out before our very eyes in our own time. Amazing. But anyhow, how we communicate, this is so critical. And if you haven't gotten your notes, I've got notes for everybody. This is something I've got up on the board. Listen to this. This was mind-blowing. Of the 4 language skills in marriage, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, one is fundamental. There's one that really makes all the difference in the world when it comes to a strong, godly marriage. And it is not speaking, it's listening. Abraham. Now, by the way, that story cuts both ways. There are times when wives need to listen to husbands, so I'm just using this as an example. Listen to this. There are 4 major skills: reading, writing, speaking, listening. One is clearly fundamental. Which is the most fundamental of the others? According to one estimate, this is a quote, Humans typically spend 70 to 80% of our waking hours in some form of communication. So we're always communicating. And notice what I'm doing as I'm speaking. I'm moving my arms, I'm gesturing. I may make facial expressions from time to time to communicate, but we spend 70 to 80% of our waking hours communicating. But here's the real critical issue. Of that time, we spend about 9% writing, 16% reading, 30% speaking, and 45% listening. That's an amazing fact. Think about that for a moment. 45% of our communication time is spent listening, 30% is spent talking. However, and here is the problem in all of this. When it comes to listening, there's a problem that confronts us all. We are better at talking than listening. I know I am. I readily admit it. Chris and I talk about this from time to time in our marriage. But this fact further complicates the problem because most of us believe that we're good listeners. We have this false notion that we are good listeners. Listening is a learned skill. That's why we pay therapists money, and basically what they're doing is listening. Freud called it talk therapy. The psychiatrist has you on a sofa, and the psychiatrist is taking notes, asking questions, but listening. When I was doing therapy, one of the great qualities I was taught in my master's program was learning how to listen to the person globally. I'll teach you about that in just a moment. But that's the problem. Most of us believe we're good listeners. However, and this is a quote, this fact tells a different story. According to a survey, 96% of people think they're good listeners. 96%. We all know, any of us who have been in a disagreement, shall we say, or an argument with somebody else, we are not good listeners. Research shows that people only retain about half of what other people are saying. We're not good listeners. But that's the key to good communication. Had Abraham listened to Sarah, God wouldn't have had to intervene. This must have been some conversation to get God's attention and to get God to step into it and say, Abraham, listen to your wife. That had to be an important conversation taking place. Think about it. When was the last time God stepped in one of your conversations between you and your wife or you and your husband? Half are good listeners, or half remember what they've been listening to. In Susan McPherson's book, quote, The Lost Art of Connecting, she illustrates this disconnecting by pointing to Julian Treasure's popular TED Talks. Now, many of us have heard of the TED Talks, capital T, capital E, capital D, TED Talks. They're very popular. His presentation called, quote, How to Speak So That People Want to Listen, end quote, garnered 47 million views. 47. I'm happy when I get 1,000. 47 wanted to view how to speak so that people want to listen. Unfortunately, he did another talk. This one was titled 5 Ways to Listen Better, quote unquote. And that one had less than 10 million views. People are more interested in learning how to persuade others through their talking rather than listening. I'll give you a secret right now. If you can become a good listener, you will become a very persuasive person. Not only in your marriage, but in all your relationships with other people. People are drawn to people who are good listeners. Why? Because most of us are lousy listeners. And in marriage, this is a critical asset to become a good listener. As we get into this study today, I'm going to share some real stories, real life stories with you that are going to be eye-opening. I really believe that. Anyway, where does the problem stem from? I'll tell you where it stems from, in my opinion, among other places, but the number one place is public schools. Think about it for a moment. Public education. Of the four language skills, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, one is not taught. They teach you reading, writing, right? They teach public speaking, Has anybody out here in the audience had public speaking course? When was the last time you had a public listening course? Never. They don't teach it. While educators recognize that listening is the key to learning, the emphasis is often on speaking. And the probability is you were offered a public speaking class, but not one for listening. And we assume in our culture, our nation, if you will, that listening is a skill that comes about through osmosis somehow. It's something we do naturally. That's not true. Hearing comes naturally. There's a difference between hearing and listening. And we all hear, but we all don't listen. And this is critical. Stay tuned. We're going to learn how to listen today, and it's going to pay huge dividends. I mentioned one of them in my post. It improves your sex life and marriage. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Anyway, today we know that listening skills can be taught and developed. They can be learned like reading and writing. With that in mind, let's begin with some basics as we work towards some specific things you can do to improve your marriage. Now, I have on the board, up in my notes, you can't see it, but perhaps some of you can look it up. This is the Chinese character I have up on the screen. It's the Chinese character translated to listen. And notice what's in the Chinese character. It has 5 elements: eyes, ear, undivided attention, focus, mind, and open heart. All those elements on the Chinese character are involved in listening. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. Now, let's get back to our notes here. How we listen is important. We need to learn how to listen with our eyes, ears, and heart. That's what I called a moment ago global listening. A good therapist, for instance, is paying attention to the person they're counseling. This is one of the skills that you're taught when you become a professional counselor. And by the way, someone asked me recently what my credentials were. I was a senior pastor for 25 years, engaged in a lot of counseling. My undergraduate is psychology, and my master's is in counseling. I was a licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan before Christine and I retired and left. I was a licensed therapist. And so I was a professional counselor as well as a pastoral counselor. Added to that, when people want to know what are your credentials, I've been married for 53 years to Christine. And she and I have had to work through this marriage. And one of the skills we have to develop in our marriage is listening to each other. We're not above all of this. Trust me on that. But I know a little bit about listening. Let's talk about it again globally. Number one, there's the verbal. Verbal is what I say when I'm speaking, I should say, in a conversation. That's what I say. But sometimes what I say and what you see in my face may differ. You know what I'm talking about, right? My expression may differ from my words. Verbally, non-verbally, is what I do. Now, verbally, you hear the words, you can kind of understand that, but non-verbally is a little more difficult. Non-verbally has to do with facial expressions, posture, and so forth. Listen to this. According to the science of pasmology, you didn't know there was a science of pasmology, did you? Well, there is. There are several 100,000 facial expressions alone. Now, having raised a lot of girls, I've probably seen all of them in my time. I've probably seen all several thousand, 100,000 facial expressions in my family, one way at another, one time or another. Add to this your hand gestures, right? Arm gestures, posture, right? I know as a therapist, when I'm across the table from someone, if I want to get a little more intimate or appear, I lean into them a little bit. See, that's posture. That's a nonverbal communication. There are a lot of that's going on, but most of us don't think of it consciously. Again, we confuse hearing with listening. They're not the same. Listening is global. You're not only listening to what they're saying, but you're looking at what we call affect. In our household, by the way, we watch a lot of murder mysteries. And every time they interview the suspect, we're looking at their affect. Everybody in the room, Hope, Christine, myself, we're all looking at the affect to see, and we sit there saying, she's lying. Yeah, she's lying. Look at her face. We can tell her, well, we don't know that, but that's part of listening. But here's something that's important. We can't really interpret gestures, facial expressions, and so forth without asking. One of the keys to good listening is asking the person questions that are pertinent to what's going on. If they're sending a mixed signal with their facial expression, ask them. If they look sad but you're unsure, ask them. It's okay, because we're trying to listen, not just hear, not just see. We want to listen globally. Emotionally, that has to do with what I feel or what the person is feeling at the time they're talking to us. The last is the emotional level of communicating, and it's difficult to interpret. Again, you have to ask them. It's very important. Now, if these three are not in agreement with each other, if a person's words and their affect and their emotion are somehow not congruent, they don't agree with each other, the person is being dishonest. Now, they may not be purposefully dishonest to deceive you, but they may be in conflict of some kind. And so that needs to be explored. And how do you do that? You ask pertinent questions. Now, look, I'm not trying to turn you into a therapist. I'm trying to give you good tips on interpersonal communication, especially in marriage. This will pay huge dividends, trust me. Here's what Paul had to write about communication. Listen to this. Wherefore, putting away a lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, we are members one of another. Be angry and sin not. In other words, there's a place for godly anger. God's been angry at times, but don't sin. Don't let your anger control you or push you into a situation where you become sinful in that communication. Be angry, but don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Neither give place to the devil. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. Stop. Neither give place to the devil. What Paul is suggesting here is when you have cursing and swearing and name calling, you're kind of acting like the devil. Don't give place to the devil. Don't let corrupt communications come out of your mouth. But that which is good to use of building up, edifying, that it might minister grace unto the hearers. Grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you are sealed unto the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, evil speaking be put away with you with all malice, or in other words, purposefully, with all intent. And be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Let's read that last one and think about a marriage. Think about a good, strong marriage. Be kind one to another. Be kind to your wife, to your husband. Tender-hearted. You know, when you're married or for a period of time, you tend to lose some of this edge. Many people do. That's why the divorce rate's almost 50% after 8 years. They've forgotten how to be tender-hearted. They become used to one another, if you will, instead of still loving one another. Forgiving one another, a key to a successful marriage. Why? We all sin. We've all fallen short of the glory of God, period, exclamation point. Even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. Now, here are the three themes that Paul has highlighted for us. Number one, be honest. Now, this might not appear to be easy because there are times when you don't want to say what you're thinking. A wise man doesn't speak all that's in his mind. There's a time and a place to speak some things. But being honest, be current with one another. This is very, very important. And by the way, when I say be honest, you know when people many times become honest with each other? Quote unquote honest, when they get angry. Now they become honest. Oh yeah, you think you're such a hot shot, and out it comes. Well, that's inappropriate. The timing is wrong. The place may be wrong. The other is when they want to hurt somebody, they'll become brutally honest, all right? Not just honest, brutally honest. They're lashing out at this person. That's ungodly. The second theme Paul mentioned here was be current. Don't let the sun go down in your anger. Stay current on the important things in your marriage. Talk to one another. Listen to one another. Again, not just hear or see, but listen. Learn to listen to one another. Be current. This is something Christine and I really stress. Just briefly, I'll tell you a story. My dad was a sandbagger. He didn't believe in staying current. Of course, my dad, we never had any real heart-to-heart talks. My dad wasn't that kind of a man. He was raised in Georgia, Cedartown, Georgia. Grew up with a very strict mom. His dad was gone early on, and my dad was a sandbagger. Now, when he punished the boys, especially, he beat us with a belt. He would hit us with the strap that Uncle Louis gave him. It was a barber strap, and they straw the razor blades, you know. And that belt was powerful. But the thing is, you never knew when Dad was going to give it to you. I know this is a silly illustration, but I would say to people, I could rob a bank and nothing would happen. But a month later, I would do something almost innocent, but something wrong that he deemed wrong. And suddenly he would beat me, not only for that, but beat me for robbing the bank. Well, I'd rather you beat me for robbing the bank when I robbed the bank. In other words, keep current. Don't sandbag on each other. Because when you do, and it comes out, it's going to be very punishing. And in fact, the person, if there's a long period of time between the offense and the so-called punishment, because you sandbag, the person might look at you and think, what are you doing? I thought you forgave me 5 years ago for what I did. And it's still brewing in your heart? Be current. This is so important. The third area he addresses is wholesomeness in your words. You got to be mindful of what you say. This is so critical. Words have an impact. You can kill somebody with your tongue. You can just break their spirit. You can hurt them deeply. And nothing is more true than in a marriage where two are one flesh. And you've got this part of your life, your other half, lashing out or hurting you with unwholesome words, cursing, name-calling. Avoid all that, ridiculing. This is especially important. I want to say to married couples, young married couples, this is critical. Don't do this stuff in public. Don't do this at a family gathering. If you have an issue, I'm going to get to that, but you want to set aside some private time. Now, here's some positive things to do. One, look at each other. This might sound silly, and perhaps for some people it's uncomfortable, the eye contact. But this shows you're connecting, that you're focused, you're interested. That's important. In fact, avoid distractions. If this is an important conversation, number one, turn the cell phone off. Put it in another room. Because you know, as soon as you hear that beep, you say, oh my God, I got a like on Facebook. That might be a message from somebody important. No, it's not. If this conversation is important and you're going to bring that phone and you're going to listen and look at your cell phone every time it beeps, it's not important. You're sending a nonverbal cue to that person. This conversation is not important and you're not listening. You're hearing. No phones, no TV, no children. And resist the natural inclination to think about your reply or your argument. This is something we tend to do when we're in an argument or discussion of differences. Instead of hearing or listening to the person, while we're hearing their words, we're thinking how to give a rebuttal or a one-up. You know, aha, you think you got it. Well, resist that. And don't fall into the trap of believing you have to agree on everything. You don't have to agree on everything. Look, in the beginning, God set a standard of difference. The man and the woman, if nothing else, have different genitalia. They're different. Their response when God comes down and confronts them is different. She blames the serpent. He blames God and her, of course. But they're all punished. We're different by design. We're different on purpose. And we need to enjoy that and celebrate it, but also learn how to work with it in a marriage or relationship. Anyway, let the other person finish what they're saying before you reply. Do not interrupt. That is not easy for me to do. My mind is cooking. And I've been trained to listen. Oh, and by the way, who trained me to listen? This is funny. In my master's program at Oakland University, yes, Oakland University in Auburn Hills, I only had one male professor. All of the rest were women, and they taught me how to listen. They drilled it into my skull. God bless them all. They did a good job. I really am indebted to them. Avoid responding emotionally, especially when someone pushes your button. And you know, when you're in a marriage, after a few years, you know what button to push. You know how to get your wife's anger up, and she knows how to get yours. Don't use that button. Don't do that. Why? Anger tends to shut down a conversation. In fact, unbridled anger tends to turn into an argument. No, nobody's listening in an argument. Everybody's fighting, yelling, screaming, whatever. They're trying to win. Use open-ended questions when you want information. This is a key in counseling. If you want information, use an open-ended question. An open-ended question is something like, when you were with so-and-so, what did you do? And then they'll give you information. Well, we went here, we did this, and so forth. Open-ended tend to be what, where, who questions. Closed-ended questions can be answered with yes or no. Did you like yesterday's show? No. Did you enjoy the meal? No. Well, what meal did you like? Well, I enjoyed. See, now I've asked an open-ended. I enjoyed the meal. Blah blah blah. Learn how to avoid yes or no questions if you want information. And here's the one big one you don't want to ask. When in conflict, with somebody, you want to ask them why, plaintively, why did you do that? The universal answer to that question, why did you do that, is I don't know. How much information did you just get? Zero. Instead, let's say that your son has run his car off the road. Why did you do that? I don't know. Instead, you say, what happened? Well, the road was slick. We just had a little snowstorm. And I wasn't speeding or anything, but as I turned that corner, my car slid a little bit. Maybe I need new tires. So I don't. Now you're getting information. See? Is that making sense to anybody out there? Good. Thank you, honey. She's always encouraging me. Anyway, avoid interrupting. I have a word here. Christine will review my notes sometimes before the Bible studies. Christine's my number one resource. When we're in the car going shopping or whatever, we're talking, she's taking notes. She spurs me on. She elicits thoughts out of me in our conversation. She's my number one. But here she wrote, I put down, avoid interrupting, let the other person finish their thoughts. Interruptions tend to make the other person think you're not listening to them. Why? Because you're not listening to them. This devalues them in the conversation. And Christine wrote, we thoughtlessly do this to each other. Well, speak for yourself, will you? Oh, you mean globally? Oh, you mean everybody? Oh, I took that personally. You see, I had to ask what was going on. Now you explained it. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Now that I got that one off the hook. She's off the hook, folks. The benefits of listening. This is really important. When you listen, you open up the possibility of learning. That's number one. If you're paying good money, for instance, at a university, and you go into your lab or your class, you're sitting there to learn. If you're not listening, you're throwing away your money. Not hearing, listening. That's the key, remember? When you listen to your spouse, you're building a relationship by showing them that they are important to you. Listen, I'm telling you, husbands, listen to me for a moment, if nobody else. This is one of the keys to a strong, successful marriage. Why? Because nobody listens to women anymore. For that matter, they probably haven't listened to them for a long time. And I cite as my case, Abraham. Remember, Abraham wouldn't listen to his wife Sarah? And God had to intervene and say, listen to your wife. Women, we'll learn later how important listening to them is. I've got some stories to tell you. If your wife feels safe in a relationship, safe enough to share her hopes and fears with her husband, the probability is that she won't seek another man to connect with. Let me tell you a story, true story. A woman came to me for therapy. This was back in Michigan. And of course, when she came in, I always take some notes in my head. For instance, when a married woman comes in for therapy, I look to see if she's wearing her wedding ring. Okay? This is important. Now, it may not mean anything. Remember, how do I clarify what it means? What do? I ask. Yeah, I ask. Sometime in the interview, the intake interview, I will ask her, oh, by the way, I noticed you're not wearing your wedding ring. And then I shut up and let her respond. Okay? That's simple. She was a very attractive woman. She was married to a very successful man. They lived in an upscale suburb of Detroit, very wealthy, I might add. And they had a couple of children, younger children. So you would look at her on the outside and think she has everything going for her. It turned out she divorced her husband and left him for another man. And after a few sessions, I was able to develop a mental picture of the other man. He had a menial job, a very modest income, lived in a small home, and he was physically unattractive. And I couldn't figure out initially why she would leave her husband and all of that good stuff for this guy. You know what I discovered? Her husband didn't listen to her. They had no communication virtually. And somehow she had stumbled into this guy in some market or whatever, or gas station, and they struck up just kind of a casual friendship, and one thing led to another. And he was this great listener, she said. She told me, he's such a great listener. And the next thing you know, I felt my emotions kind of going toward him, gravitating. And then I started to like him. And the next thing you know, I thought I loved him. And I fell in love with him. She didn't fall in love with him. She fell in love with his listening skills. Think about it. It was an amazing story. It's a true story. Listening affects intimacy in marriage. I promise you, if you become a good listener, it will improve your sex life. No question. Oh, I don't want to say what Christine wrote here in this footnote. I'll let that go. You wrote, she underlined, good listening will improve your sex life. Thank you, Christine. I'll make a note of that. Finally, make time. Make time to set aside time and talk and listen. You set aside time to go here, to do this, to do that. And I'm not talking about work. Everybody has to work. But in that time you have alone, your special time, you have to set aside time. You're sending a nonverbal signal to your spouse, you are important to me. And you have a cup of coffee, and it might only be, how was your day going? How did it go at work today? And you listen, not just hear, listening to them. That's an important way to start building. Each little block adds up to a wall, a house, whatever, a structure. Wonderful. Now here's some roadblocks to effective listening. I got to get to these. Failing to allow for the fact that men and women speak differently. They speak a different language. And Christine put in there, yes, we do. I believe Christine inspired Google Maps in ways. You know how Google Maps says, in 200 yards, you are going to turn right onto Henderson Bend Road. That's what Christine does. I'll ask Christine, honey, which way do I want to go? She'll say, well, you want to go south. South? I want to know right or left. If I ask her a question that I think is just kind of a simple question, I'm going to get all the history. If I ask her a question, did we ever go to SeaWorld? And instead of answering yes or no, which most men would answer yes or no, Christine says, you know what? I believe I was carrying Charity at the time. Yeah, I was pregnant with Charity. Oh yeah, now I remember. It was hot. It was August. I was 7 months pregnant. Oh my God, it was sweltering hot. Yeah, we went to SeaWorld. I think it was the one in Ohio. Stop, honey. I just want to know yes or no. Did we go to SeaWorld? Yes. That's all. Okay? Now, for me as a man, I'm satisfied. For her, maybe not. Why? We're different. So there are times when I have to let my wife fill in the blanks. That's what she does, and that's okay. Not going to kill me. And by the way, she put a note in here when it says that women speak a different language. She put in, yes, we do, exclamation point. You're right, honey. Women tend to focus on the relationship and details. Now pay attention, men. Men tend to focus on the problem. This is reflected in the insight that women use more pronouns such as I, you, and we. Listen to this. I can't make it up. Social scientist Professor James W. Pennebaker estimated that on average, women use 85,000 more pronouns a year than men. More, 85,000. The significance is that pronouns are used in relationships. When you use a pronoun, you're usually talking about a person, right? A relationship. I'm going to get back to this in just a moment, give you an example. Number 2, a roadblock to effective listening. Wanting to explain yourself so that they understand what your position is and accept it. Now, it's one thing for you to explain to me your position, but if you are insistent that I accept it, you've just established a roadblock. We're not communicating any longer. It's one way, it's not two-way. You do not have to accept what somebody else is saying. What we have to do is learn to what? Listen. Thank you. Number 3, wanting to be right. Proverbs 18:2, I like this one. A fool does not delight in understanding, but only wants to show off his opinions. Proverbs 18:2. Wanting to be right at all costs. Damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead. I'm going to be right come hell or high water. No, well, you may be right and you also may be divorced. So, make a choice. Being judgmental. Luke 6:37. Judge not and you will not be judged. Condemn not, you will not be condemned. Forgive and you shall be forgiven. So try not to be judgmental in a condemning sense. Now let me explain this. In the scriptures, the word judge has different meanings. One Greek word means to discern something, to understand it. Another means to condemn it. Now here, we can judge things. It means to discern, test, weigh what's right or wrong. We can do that. But we don't judge in the sense of condemning. Only God can judge and send a soul to hell, not us. It's very important. Have a secret agenda. I've met people that would come to counseling and they would present that they want to save their marriage, but that's not why they're there. They had a secret agenda, and it doesn't work. 6, sending a conflicting message. This is a good one. Proverbs 23, verses 6 and 7. Eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye, neither desire thou his dainty meats. For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with you. So when we send those conflicting messages, again, it's tough to listen. Number 7, we may be thinking of how we're going to respond instead of listening. Number 8, assuming we understand what the other person is trying to tell us. Don't assume. What do? Ask appropriate questions. For instance, you could say, do I understand what you said or what you meant when you said? Proverbs 18:13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it's a folly and a shame, quote unquote. Very simple, wise, godly advice. In addition to the roadblocks, I wanted to get to these. Be aware of the things that tend to cause arguments. These are trigger words. Yes, you'll recognize them. Use the word always. You always do that. How about never? You never love me. You'll never take me out. You never. That's a bad word. 3, there you go again. You've heard of people being hysterical. This is historical. This is when you become historical. There you go again. Name calling. Oh, that's not God. Don't do that. 5, character assassination. This is a good one. You're just like your mother. Ooh, you don't want to say that to your wife. I don't care what her mother was like. Don't compare her to any other woman, period. Alive or not alive. Punishing silence. 7, yelling, screaming, cursing. We could add to this list. Foul language, sarcasm, name-calling, physical and verbal violence, none of which is godly, none of which is permitted, none of which is going to work. Remember Ephesians 4:25-32? Current, honest, wholesome. Now, how to argue fairly. Let's talk about some positive things here. Love, willingness to give and take or speak and listen. Christine noticed this is the big one. If practice, she wrote, first can avoid the other stuff. I think she's right. Open, honest, share feelings. Be willing to lose a battle, in other words, so you can win the war. Focus on what is right, not who is right. What is right is the key. Use I messages to avoid blame shifting, like Adam and Eve, right? I did this, I'm responsible, I think, I feel, I believe. Listen for the emotion, that's really important. And use, in an appropriate manner, affectionate words, honey and sweetheart, such as that. And I call Christine sweetheart all the time. Now, there's a way to use those words when they're not being used affectionately, right? Tone of voice, facial expressions. Admit mistakes and apologize when appropriate. And finally, agree to listen, not agree. Don't try to win the argument. Don't try to defend or convince. Listen and try to understand before you attempt to fix the problem. Now, I want to get into something that's vital here. Men, pay attention, and ladies, I want you to pay attention because I think this will help you understand your man, if I may. When men perceive a problem in marriage, they tend to view it as a challenge to fix the issue, the problem. For them, the problem may suggest that something is broken. They want to fix the problem and they want to fix it now. That's an overall tendency of men. It doesn't apply to every man. But basically, when a man sees a problem in the marriage, he wants to find a remedy and fix it as quickly as possible. Women don't think that way. Remember, we're different. Women don't think that way. Look, women, generally speaking, see things differently. For a woman, the problem has caused damage to the relationship. So she's looking at it relationship-wise. And she might even want to step aside for a few minutes and think about it. And you might have to give her some space. Here's how it played out in one of my maximum marriage workshops years ago. We were concluding a workshop in Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the Panline Hotel. We had, I think, about 200 couples up there at the time. I forget. Anyway, at the end of the Sunday session, before we dismissed for to go home, I would ask a couple to volunteer. And the young couple put their hand up, and they came up. And I asked them to select a real, though minor, problem in the relationship to work on and solve before the group. In one seminar, a young couple volunteered to share one of the minor problems before the group. The wife began by telling the husband that she felt that they needed more time together and that work and other interests were taking up too much of his time and she needed or wanted some more time with him. So she expressed that to him. The husband responded sincerely, "Look, when I get home," he said, "I'll spend the first 15 minutes with you." When he said that, I stopped him, did a little timeout. I turned to all the participants in the workshop. I said, "What is he doing?" And they yelled out, "He's fixing." Thank you. Turned back to the couple. Second time. So let's try that again. So she said, "I just feel that we're drifting apart. We need a little more time together." And so he said, "You know what? You're right. We need to take one day a week and we need to set aside just you and me. No kids, no phones, no TV. Just you and me have a date night." And I yelled out, "Stop!" I looked at all the people in the tent. I said, "What is he doing?" They yelled out, "What?" "He's fixing." Third time. Third time. She complains again. So he says, "Well, how about we take an extended vacation?" "He's fixing." He hasn't gotten the message yet. So he thinks he's offering solutions to what he thinks is the problem. The fact is he doesn't know what the problem is yet. Why? Because he's been hearing, not listening. So if you want to know what she wanted to express, you have to ask her. So finally, after 3 attempts, the wife blurted out before all of these couples, "I don't think you love me anymore." Whoa. She went from, "We don't spend enough time together, I don't think you love me anymore." Every person in that workshop fell silent. You could hear a pin drop, including me. Now, she had finally bared her soul. Despite having a couple of hundred people listening and watching her, she bared her soul. "I don't think you love me anymore." Now, he was listening. I had to do some intervention on that, but that's what happens between men and women. We think differently, we communicate differently, we feel different on many, many things. And so listening is a key ingredient to a strong, godly marriage. Listening to each other, having respect for one another, and your opinions, though they may differ, you respect the fact that they hold them, and it's okay. That's godly. Anyway, had the husband simply used some of the techniques he had been taught those previous 2 days, he would have gotten to the question pretty quickly of what's really going on in her heart, not the underlying problem. She presented, "We need more time," but the real problem was, "I don't think you love me." Now, finally, my wife's best friend. Who is your wife's best friend? I'll tell you who your wife's best friend is, and I don't even know who your wife is. Your best friend, your wife's best friend is the person she can talk to and share her secrets with, her hopes, her dreams, her fears. Now, many times it's her sister or another woman that she's become close to. But once in a while, the person that becomes her best friend is another man, because he's the one that's listening. Remember the woman who left a successful husband and a good income and so forth for a man of modest means because he was listening? Most men do not build relationships by confiding their secrets to one another. We don't do that. Men do things together. We kill animals. We catch fish. We do that kind of stuff together. We play pool. I remember I played so much pool with Dr. DeSantis, John DeSantis, and Marty Buss in our home on Lake Orion in Michigan. We would get together on the weekends, and the wives would go one area and talk, and we would do stuff. Women talk, men do, right? It's kind of in our genetic makeup somehow. I don't know. But men don't tend to talk about things, especially emotional things, relationship things. But women do. If you want to become your wife's best friend, listen to her and encourage her to talk to you. Don't just hear her. Don't just see her. Listen to her. And you can become her best friend. I believe I am my wife, Christine's best friend. I really do. Does she confide everything in me? No. Why? We have 3 daughters, so she's got other women close to her she can confide in. But for the most part, if it comes to male friendships, I'm her number one. And in part because I not only love her, I listen to her, because that's part of my love for her and respect. I listen to her. And by the way, like Abraham's wife, Sarah, once in a while, Christine has a lot of good stuff to say. Okay, more than once in a while. The successful 7. Here we go. Let's wrap this up. Communicate frequently. Use affectionate, touching, endearing words spontaneously. On occasion, send a card or a gift or do something special for the other person just because it's Tuesday. Accent the positive and so support each other's dreams. Use wholesome words. Keep important issues current. No sandbagging. Be honest. Convey your thoughts and feelings when appropriate. Maintain a vigorous spiritual life. Worship, prayer, and study the Bible. Finally, I want to share with you 2 assertive techniques. I got to get to these. These 2 techniques are going to help you when you're in conflict with somebody, your husband, your wife, or whomever. So I want you to pay attention. The 2 assertiveness techniques that we're going to get to are called fogging and broken record. Very important. Fogging, this is really critical, and broken record. If you can master these 2 in a godly way, you're going to become a really good listener. Now, let me explain these to you. Number one, fogging. Fogging allows you to accept manipulative criticism. I'll explain it in a moment how. Acknowledging the possibility that your critic may be right in his or her criticism of you, while still retaining the right to be the final voice on whether they're right or wrong. Let me give you an illustration. This is critical. When somebody is fogging, well, let me back up. Let me get through this in a more linear way. Hold on. So the benefit of fogging allows you to accept criticism without overreacting or becoming defensive, losing focus, becoming angry. I'll give you an illustration in just a moment how it works. Broken record, which is used with fogging, this skill helps keep your focus on the message you're trying to discuss by repeating the message over and over again with subtle variations without resorting to anger or manipulation. Fogging and broken record are two assertiveness skills that you want to adopt and learn how to use so that you control your anger or frustration. You don't use these skills to control someone else. That's not godly. But these will help you control yourself. Listen to this. Broken record allows you to avoid being baited in a conversation or angry discussion or manipulated while helping you get to your message. And that's from M.J. Smith. Now, the first one, fogging. I use this when the other person becomes critical of me in a personal way. For instance, if I'm fogging somebody, and let's say Christine is angry with me one day, and she says to me, "You're just like that stupid so-and-so," or just fill in the blank, whomever. What I would reply to her to fog, I would say, "I may be," fill in the blank, or I might say, "You may be right." The key word there is may. It's a conditional acceptance of the criticism. You're not agreeing with the person. What you're doing is you're just conditionally accepting the criticism. You're going to decide on it later. So they say, "Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you're just like your father. You're stubborn." Christine, you may be right about that. Maybe I am stubborn. See what I just did? I fogged it. I embraced it conditionally. That's off the table now. We're not going to argue about whether or not I'm like my father and being stubborn. That's over here now. I fogged it. See what I did? But let's say the conversation I'm having is with someone who uses drugs. They're an addict. And I decided to confront that person. And the person says to me, "Yeah, oh, it's okay, I'm an addict. What about you? You are a," fill in the blank. I don't know. You're this or that. You're lazy. This whole one out there. You're lazy. And I would say to him, "You know what? I may be lazy." I just fogged, got it? Or, "You may be right. I might be a lazy guy." But now here comes the broken record. "But we're here to talk about your drug addiction." And then the person comes back and says, "That's all you want to do is talk about me, me, me. What about you? You know, you're not perfect." You may be right. I'm not perfect. Yeah, I'm not perfect. However, broken record, the issue at hand, see the variation? I didn't repeat it word for word. The issue at hand is your drug addiction, right? Yeah, never mind my drug addiction, hell. What about you? You spend all your money. You're constantly blowing your money. I've heard people complain about how you spend money. You know what? You may be right. I might be throwing my money away from time to time. I might be guilty of that. I fogged it. See what I did? When I fogged it, what happens? Put it over here. And then I go to broken record, and what do I say? What we're here for, though, is not about me. It's about drug addiction. We need to talk about that drug addiction, broken record. Did you get the point now? Was that a good illustration? Make sense? Those two assertiveness techniques are crucial when you're involved in an argument, a heated discussion, whatever, and you're trying to get this person to focus on one issue, and they keep throwing out and baiting you, throwing out these criticisms of you and so forth. Fog it, conditionally agree. That sets it over here, and then broken record. Yes? Okay. Did I make that clear? All right, finally, Remember the scripture, be quick to hear, listen, slow to speak, listen, slow to anger, listen. You'll improve every relationship, including, and most importantly, if you learn to listen to God, you'll improve your relationship with God too. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. You have a wonderful day. Remember, I don't solicit funds, but I do ask you to share this. If you found this important or helpful, just please share it. That's the number one thing I ask for. God bless you and thank you.